Greetings, programs, and welcome back to Blistered Reviews, an unrepentant geeking video game review show. As always, I'm your host, Shaun, and today we'll be taking a look at a recently published Atlas RPG, which comes to us from the original developers of the Etrian Odyssey. The first two games in that series, to be exact. And once again, they are trying something a bit different. So, let's just dig right into it and take a look at Lost Dimension.
I am the agent of the apocalypse. My name is the End. This destruction is but a prelude. More will come. True destruction is about to begin. If you want to continue your worthless lives, try and stop it.
We have to stop that madman at any cost. It may be time to send in the Gifted.
With their powers, they can do the impossible.
If you wish to kill me, you will need to climb this tower. Did I mention there's a traitor among you?
What? Are you trying to scare us?
If you want to climb higher, you will have to sacrifice one of your own.
At first glance, Lost Dimension might look like just another JRPG with anime-inspired protagonist. But once one actually starts digging into the game, it soon becomes clear that it's got some interesting ideas to explore. Unfortunately, said exploration is not as smooth and well executed as one might like, but nonetheless, there's something to be said for a game open to trying new things. Lost Dimension begins sometime in the recent future and follows on in the aftermath of attacks on cities all over the world perpetrated by a terrorist figure with the unlikely name of The End. Said man with the strange title concludes his offense against the rest of humanity by dropping a giant tower taller than the tallest skyscraper right into the middle of New York. Following this act, The End retreats back into the newest addition to the New York skyline, but not before revealing that he's gained control of the world's arsenal of nuclear weapons and plans to launch all of them in 13 days in order to bring about the destruction of humankind. When all conventional means of attack fail to even scratch the surface of the tower, the governments of the world turn to S.E.A.L.D., a secretive international organization whose members include teen soldiers who all possess various psychic abilities, including telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, pyrokinesis, and more. The forces of S.E.A.L.D. managed to breach the tower, but seemingly only 11 of the psychic soldiers managed to survive, and even worse, they're left partially amnesiac in the process. No longer able to fully separate friend from foe, the team must nonetheless proceed up the Tower of the End, slaying armies of enemies along the way. But early on in their journey, they encounter none other than the End himself, who reveals that there are traitors among the group's ranks. Lost Dimension is a title where gameplay and story operate heavily hand in hand, and this is simultaneously its greatest weakness and strength. In Lost Dimension, there's not just one character waiting to turn on players at the worst possible moment, but multiple potential traitors that players will have to ferret out before reaching the top of the End's tower. Even worse, the method in which a potential traitor is identified across the game's multiple stages and missions is via a group vote, and it's not only possible, but easy to pick the wrong member and end up killing an otherwise innocent and loyal ally. I don't think you can just turn to an FAQ for who to trust and who to scorn, because Lost Dimension randomizes the identity of the traitors every playthrough, and is also careful to use frequent forced autosaves to prevent any kind of save state manipulation shenanigans. As an extra bit of challenge, the amnesia that has affected the player characters of Lost Dimension even means that a character that was previously proven to be loyal can turn upon the party by the time the next vote comes around. This gives Lost Dimension an extra layer of tension and potential heartbreak, but it also has the unfortunate side effect of weakening the game's overall story as well. Since anyone could potentially get wiped out each time there's a vote, including even the first vote on follow-up playthroughs, this means the game's story tends to limit the interactions between characters. The only exception to this is the main character, who for story reasons is immune from being considered a traitor by the rest of the team, and so it falls to him to befriend others and learn their various backstories, personal quirks, and so on, while also trying to figure out who will turn on the team. Fortunately, said main character's particular psychic power is a combination of limited telepathy and future vision, and using these abilities he can hear the thoughts of companions and even enter their mental landscape in order to outright determine the current status of their loyalty vis-a-vis the group as a whole. However, in order to perform this deep dive into the psyche of a team member, players must have stored a vision point, and in general only a handful of these are handed out before a given vote. This in turn means that players can't just spam vision dives in order to determine the traitors. After every battle, they have to pay attention to the quick glimpse into the thoughts of the characters that joined in on the action that time. This can in turn help narrow the field to a more manageable number. Keep in mind, though, that determining the traitor is only half the battle, since players must then work to convince the rest of the team to vote the right way. This is handled largely via a social system, wherein the more characters fight together, the closer bonds they'll form with one another. These relationships are important in combat terms as well, as I'll go into more depth on shortly, but they're also the way in which each character decides who they trust and who they don't. Further complicating things is that characters who contribute more in battle get additional votes when the time comes, while characters who rarely participate leave themselves open to being considered the traitor by the rest of the group. Also, immediately after combat, random characters will come up to the player character and ask who they think is the traitor, which can have a major impact on how the questioner votes. And so, in this way, this Lost Dimension forced players to make full use of the team in combat and not simply rely on a few favorites, lest they find themselves in a position where they're unable to sway a vote in the right direction. Speaking of combat, fights in Lost Dimension play out in a manner somewhat similar to the kind of system seen in games such as Codename Steam and Valkyria Chronicles. The action takes place from a third-person perspective, with characters being able to move freely within their given range each turn, along with being able to perform a single action, be it attacking, using items, defending, etc. So far, so standard, but here's where things begin to get interesting. Each player character has a sanity meter that goes down when they attack or take damage, and once this meter hits 0, the character enters a berserk mode where they hit for a lot more damage, but also leave the player's direct control and will attack friend and foe alike. Special attacks tend to drain more sanity than regular attacks, plus also requiring enough energy from a separate meter, while defending will restore a small amount of sanity instead. The key to winning or losing battles in Lost Dimension is the proper placement and positioning of characters. For one thing, friendly fire is very much a concern when performing attacks that can hit multiple targets. Even more important, though, is the effect the social system can have on combat. When a given character performs an attack, if teammates who they share a positive relationship are within range, they will attack as well for no additional cost. This means in any given turn, in theory, it's possible to perform up to 36 attacks if you set things up just right. Obviously, this can quickly sway a battle in one's favor, but keep in mind the same goes for the enemy as well. Only, most enemies who are at the same level of a given player character tend to have much higher HP, and said enemies are soulless automatons, so they will always be capable of performing assist attacks, and enemy squads tend to far outnumber the player characters the majority of the time. In short, a divide-and-conquer strategy tends to be absolutely vital to survival in Lost Dimension, since even a gathering as small as 3 enemies can potentially take out a player character with mid-level HP or less. Add in a set of 11 player characters with some truly distinct skills and movement types. One character can fly and thus quickly change elevation on stages with multiple levels. Another can teleport through walls and other obstacles to reach switches or hard-to-reach treasures. And you have all the makings for a compelling and engaging combat system. And, in case you're worried, just because you wipe out somebody in a vote doesn't mean you lose access to their abilities, because they drop a little spear that you can equip to another character and thus transfer their abilities. In short, with each character you take out, you actually have the potential to make your remaining squad all the more powerful. But that's also why it's all the more crucial you go into the final battle with the end with as few traitors as possible, because basically what happens is any traitor who reaches the end of the game will leave the party and join the end instead in the final battle. So it's possible, if you really screw things up, to be by yourself in the final battle going up against not only the last boss, but 5 of your former teammates who are all tricked out with the powers of all 11. So yeah, that's not a great situation. The biggest downside to combat in Lost Dimension is the fact that enemy types are way too limited, and the game makes a heavy reliance on that old RPG standby of the palette swap. Thankfully, mini-bosses and full-on bosses do exist in decent numbers, and the stages themselves tend to have diverse layouts. But still, there's no denying that fights can tend to blur together at times across the game's 30 to 40 hour long main campaign. Yet, despite these issues, I would still argue that where Lost Dimension struggles the most is in terms of story and character development. I've already talked some about how the randomized nature of who the traders are limits character interaction, but it goes deeper than that. For one thing, it's possible to develop relationships between the main character and another party member to the point of a semi-romance, but no matter how close a player may be to that character, they can still end up an irrevocable traitor. This just feels off in terms of character motivation, and that issue stretches across the entire game. More than once, when the time came to eliminate a character, for example, their response to shortly being killed by their fellows amounted to a few lines of dialogue and a shrug, and this feels both anticlimactic and untrue to anything resembling an actual person's behavior. Also, the game basically handles the majority of its character interactions via visual novel-style one-on-one character portrait interactions, and as a result, makes the classic mistake of telling too often instead of showing. What with the main character's ability to dive into the minds of his fellows, you'd think there was the perfect opportunity to let players experience each character's history firsthand, but the game squanders this opportunity in favor of endless talking heads, and it's all the poorer for it. I won't say there weren't times when the identity of a traitor hurt, but generally, what fondness I felt for a given character came more from liking their visual design or their utility in combat than any real emotional attachment that it developed. This stands in stark contrast to, say, Mass Effect 3, which managed to leave me heartbroken at the final fate of a character almost half a dozen times over the course of its running time. By comparison, the story of Lost Dimension never really managed to fully connect, and instead left me at arm's length more often than not. Because of this, and because of both the repetitiveness and later difficulty spikes of combat, I can't say Lost Dimension is a game that I think is likely to have much appeal to non-RPG fans. However, those who do enjoy the genre will find enough unique ideas present in the game to make it worth their time, especially if they own a PS Vita. While the game is also available for the PS3, it's the Vita that continues to be woefully lacking in releases, quality or otherwise, and when combined with Lost Dimension's cheaper $40 price tag, there's plenty of value to be found. For one thing, this is a pretty good looking game, and while I wish the game wasn't so reliant on the character portraits, at least said portraits are large, expressive, and feature a good deal of animation. Ultimately, this isn't a game for everyone, but those prepared to put up with Lost Dimension's flaws will find in it an experience that truly stands out from the crowd. Score, 7 out of 10. Great. Recommendation? Try it out. And that's going to do it for this episode of Blistered Reviews. Come back next Tuesday where I'll be taking a look at another Atlas RPG, this time the much-anticipated 3DS release, Etrian Odyssey Untold 2, The Fanfare Night. Until then, for Channel Awesome and Unrepentant Geeking, I'm Shaun Cronenfeld, wishing you all happy gaming.